We're going to start with Dr. Marco Moder. He's a partner in the McKinsey & Company in Seoul on learnings from the Northeast, rejuvenating Indian chemical industry with international collaborations. He's been with McKinsey for the last couple of years, and before that, he used to be at Bosch in Germany. And over to Dr. Moder to take over this presentation.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Very glad to be here. I actually landed this morning from Seoul, South Korea. I'm partner leading our chemical and energy practice for McKinsey in Korea. And I'm actually working 40% of my time in Korea. I'm working 40% in Japan and the other 20% in the rest of mainly Asia, China, over the past years. I've been in the region now for 6 years. So I'm trying to give you a little bit of an overview and an idea into what is it where Northeast Asian chemical companies and Indian companies could potentially collaborate in the future. And I will work a lot with cases, a lot with what companies in Northeast Asia are doing today. And I hope I can give you some inspiration into who could be potential partners also for you in the future, as a lot is happening in that region. Yeah. I heard that this is the longest session. I didn't want to make it even longer, but with the presentation, it's easier. So if you look into the chemical companies in Japan and Korea especially, you will see that there has been for decades a focus in Korea, especially on petrochemicals and on an operating model which is focusing on demand in Korea and especially export into China. And in Japan, it was a lot of continuous improvement, already over 1-2 decades move into specialty chemicals, but still somewhat also localized operating model. And this is something which we are seeing to change over the past 5 to 10 years, but especially strong over the last 3 years. And you will see it later. I have a case, for example, on the 2 biggest chemical companies, LG Chem and Mitsubishi Chemicals today, how there's a significant change in their strategy going forward and their aspiration for 2030 in terms of globalization, in terms of focus chemicals where they're looking into. And I think this can be inspiring for many other companies around the world as well. So I will first of all be talking about 4 core elements of their strategy. The first element I will be talking about is the move to specialty chemicals in both Korea and Japan. The second one into them moving into merger and acquisition and how this has accelerated over the few past years. Third topic is into how they are moving more into pure plays, less into diversified chemicals. And lastly, and you've heard about it very often today, is the topic of sustainability. There is a lot of activities ongoing into sustainability, especially looking into areas like EV batteries, like hydrogen, where they are all basically working on these focus topics. Let me go one by one. So first of all, if we are looking into the chemical landscape as of today, and this one shows you the average of the chemical companies in Korea, you see that only 46% of them have a specialty chemicals profile, 46% of the products. The number for Japan is still pretty similar. If you go to the top 20 companies globally, and just in the session before us, we had a few of them, you will see that 70% of the total portfolio today will be specialty chemicals. And that is something that has been realized by the Northeast Asian players as well. And there are a lot of movements into specialty chemicals and actually also divesting their petrochemical business in the coming 5 to 10 years. One of those examples is Sumitomo Chemicals from Japan. So as you can see, Sumitomo has relatively early already started with their divestment of petrochemicals. They had an 80% share still in the 80s, and already in 2000, it went back to 50%. However, there's now a gradual decrease, and that decrease will continue over the next years, where they are really focusing on areas like agriculture, like IT chemicals, like pharma, and the overarching electronic and energy chemical sector. I think Sumitomo is a classical example on how the strategies of the other big conglomerates in both countries will evolve in the coming years. I will come later into this one, but they will of course also need a solution for their petrochemical business. And I personally believe that Indian chemical companies could be one element of the solution that the Northeast Asian players are looking for. The second topic is merger and acquisition activity. When I was coming to Korea in 2017, basically Korea and Japan did not exist on the big M&A conferences or chemical conferences around the globe. Yeah, when I talk about mergers, acquisitions in the chemical industry, I believe still 70% of those are made based on personal relationships. These personal relationships, many of the executives in the region, they don't have. But this is changing. So you see here on the numbers that over the past 3 to 5 years, the average growth rate of inorganic growth, so of M&A, has been growing 8% year over year in Northeast Asia, whereas the average amount of M&A in the industry has only been growing by 2% for chemical companies. I have to admit that the total number is still relatively low. So the number of Korean, Japanese companies taking over companies in the US or in Europe is still small, but it's significantly accelerating. And I have rarely seen something like the last now 24 months in terms of due diligences and really looking into overseas targets before. So there are a couple of examples on the next page for both Korean and Japanese players again. Basically, these are 4 main elements. This is one time looking into new products or new geographies. And I've added here an example from the company DL Chemical. Some of you might still know them as Dalim. DL Chemical is the biggest producer of polybutene worldwide, number 1. And they've done a $2.5 billion takeover just a year ago from Kraton in the US. There's not much of synergies, to be very honest. Yeah, so looking in their portfolio, which they are having in Korea today mainly, looking at the portfolio that Kraton has today, this is not about synergies. This is not about consolidating markets. This is really about understanding that the current core business will not hold them forever, and they need new products in new geographies in order to survive. The other 3 main topics are vertical integration. So really looking into getting into a better cost position in a very competitive market. It's about consolidation. And I think the consolidation will especially happen within the countries. Also here you could be part of it. I'm not sure you want to be part of it, yeah, but there needs to happen consolidation. The number of crackers that you are having in both regions is far too big. They are not world scale. And you know, if you don't have scale, if you don't have the feedstock at competitive cost, and you only have operational excellence, and this one by sure they have, this will not survive in the global chemical industry for 1 or 2 more decades. So consolidation will be happening in those markets. The last one is new customer offerings. So really looking into gaining new technologies, which you can then sell in Asia, but also wherever your target will be. SK Geocentric, former SK Global Chemicals, they renamed themselves last year, has been taken over, for example, 2 companies, 2 smaller units from Dow 3 and 4 years ago. So these are the 4 main elements that we are seeing on the M&A landscape. The third one is the topic of diversification. And my colleagues showed you this morning also that from a capital market perspective, diversified chemical companies are making less return on shareholder than pure commodity or pure specialty players. This is still at the very beginning, but this is now rapidly accelerating. I will later talk about Mitsubishi Chemicals, who have announced to exit their petrochemical business for exactly that reason. But I know about multiple other players who are looking into exactly the same. So really looking into how to split the companies into smaller, more agile, and more market-oriented companies with a stronger global footprint. I won't go through all the examples here, but Mitsubishi Chemicals, Mitsui, Denka, and Shin-Etsu are 4 companies in Japan who, while not having done a split at this moment, who have clearly integrated separated business units, which was not the case for a long time, who have clearly integrated segment-wise reporting, and who also have a different management structure, and that means different KPIs for their petrochemical business, and for their specialty chemical business. All of them are looking into it. In case anybody of you is interested in M&A also into those markets, I can tell you that if you approach them while not officially on the market, there might be quite some interest for some segments, for some maybe more intermediates and petrochemical assets to actually also find a buyer for some of those. Today, this one is mainly happening within the countries. So like also local Japanese or Korean private equity companies taking over some of their petrochemical assets. Yeah, and the last topic is obviously sustainability. You have heard a lot about it. You will hear a lot about it. This is something which these players also see as their ticket to survive in the future. And that's why there's so much focus on EV battery. There's so much focus on hydrogen. They are trying to put a focus on bio. They just need the feedstock, of course, which you don't have locally. And this topic of sustainability and green chemicals, especially into segments where Korea is also leading, Korea and Japan are also leading on the end market. And that's why hydrogen EV is so strong here, has been a massive driver over the past, I would say again, 48 months. But especially if I look into 2030, it will be the massive driver for the chemical industries overarching there. Couple of examples also here. And let me take the EV battery one, which is obviously the best one. You have 3 out of the 6 best EV battery companies in Korea: LG Energy Solutions, SK On, and Samsung SDI. You have the whole value chain, whether cathode, whether anode, separator, electrolyte, but also now upstream in different subsidiaries, especially from SK Group and LG Group. They all have different names. There are more than 20 companies. They are massively expanding this one globally. So this is a real globalization driver with, for example, LG building currently 4 plants in the US alone on EV battery. And just LG Chem has announced 3 weeks ago a cathode manufacturing plant, roughly $3 billion investment in Tennessee in the US as well. Yeah, and the same we see for electronic chemicals, the same we see for hydrogen, and the same they are starting to do now, mainly in terms of collaborations with multiple players on the bio side. So I've picked to bring it a little bit to life what it means in terms of real strategy. The 2 biggest companies in Korea, Japan, respectively. One is LG Chem, $26 billion today, and one is Mitsubishi Chemicals, I think roughly $35 billion today. And what the chairman and CEO of LG Chem has said is that he's seeing this strong industrial reset today, and he wants to use that reset in order to reshape the company. The growth potential you see here on that page from 26 to $60 billion, this is not 2050, this is 2030. Yeah? So they want to more than double within the next 8 years, and half of that will already come from battery materials. And these are different subsidiaries, but I assume the family which is behind will make that one happen, so that the significant effort on ramp up of the batteries from 1.7 billion, which you see in the middle column, to 21 billion, I believe this will happen because it's just following the confirmed orders, which their other subsidiary, LG Energy Solutions, basically has already confirmed. This is not only a volume game, this is also a technology game. And on top of the battery materials, there's the strong push for sustainability topics, which they want to grow from $1 to $8 billion. And basically, the notion there is clear. Everything which has not the signal of sustainability on it will not be invested into. So together with that new strategy came a massive reallocation also of CapEx, focus for the management, and whatever they look into has to be something in relation to sustainability, otherwise they won't follow it. Of course, LG has also given itself then a carbon net zero target for 2050. This for Northeast Asia is also relatively aggressive. Mitsubishi Chemicals. Many of you will know that there is a new Belgian CEO 2 years ago who's focusing very strongly on really increasing also the value of that company. They have a slightly different approach in terms of revenue. And is first of all also slightly more short-term until 2025. They actually say they want to reduce their revenue by 8% because they want to sell their petrochemical business. And just this Monday was an investor conference from Mitsubishi Chemicals, and they have reaffirmed on that investor conference their commitment. And together with that 8% decline in revenue goes a 35% increase in profitability. And it's a real focus away from petrochemicals towards their focus areas. And the focus areas will be also here EV, then digital, including semiconductor, health care and medical, and food chemicals. And what the CEO said on Monday is everything, even in the existing specialty chemical business, that does not fit to the big themes that he has given the company, they will divest. They will divest. So the petrochemical will be divested, first into a JV, and then he wants to sell it off. But there will also be pockets of intermediates and specialties, which will not fit to the target sectors that Mitsubishi Chemicals is looking into. And also this one will be quite significant divestments planning to happen within the next 3 years. I'm also myself looking with a lot of interest how that will work out, because it will not be easy for all of them to find a buyer in that region. Yeah, having said this one, what could it mean for the Indian chemical industry? Yeah, and I think it's mainly about finding opportunities to collaborate, or maybe even look into some of the segments and business units they might want to divest, whether this is interesting for you. But first one is, with all the investments they are making, and it's often long-term investments. Yeah, if you look into hydrogen, there can be pockets of profit in 3 or 4 years from now. Yes, with the IRA in the US, green hydrogen is positive in the business case already from 2023, but most of materials in hydrogen value chain, until it really makes money, will take 10 to 15 years. So they have massive need for CapEx investments, and they are looking for partners. How they solve it in the US, for example, is with a lot of JVs. But the same, I believe, will also be happening on hydrogen, for example. And going this one together, being also their partner in co-investing, it's surely one of the opportunities you have. The second one, and you will need a very detailed cost analysis on this one, beyond the chemical value chain, you also have Korea, Japan as some of the major exporters of refinery products and basic petrochemicals. China is becoming self-sufficient, and you know that China is further on the way to self-sufficiency than India on some of the value chains. Today, the way how the Northeast Asian companies are doing it, they sell themselves in their own country, they sell themselves in China, and they mainly use traders outside. Yeah, so the business which goes also into India, but also into Southeast Asia, it's mainly done with traders, and it's mainly done on products which they don't sell on their core markets, Korea, Japan, and China. I don't think this is the feasible and sustainable business model for the future. So getting into long-term contracts, getting into potential sourcing partnerships could be one opportunity. Or if you really want to secure, maybe together with some technology transfer on the other side, you could also go into JVs. There are a lot of companies out there which are already with private equity companies in a JV. SG Lubricants, for example, was sold at 40%, I believe, at this moment. Yeah, overall, the question is, would this potentially also help you in a long-term contract to make a good deal with some of the companies in the Northeast? The third topic is obviously growth engine. I looked this morning into which Korean and Japanese companies are actually in India. And then I found in India only LG and Lotte, for example, from Korea, relatively small operations, 120 and 140 million. This is mainly a compounding business, but they don't use the opportunities that you're having in India. And when I talk to the CEOs, they mainly tell me it's about regulation and it's about how to really navigate here the local market. how to enter here into the market. So they need partners for this one. They will not do it. Many are open, but clearly need somebody to help them. So getting into a kind of technology partnership where you are their partner for especially some of the new value chains. But putting this one also in the other direction, that you have very, very strong export business, of course, on agriculture, on pharma, and I don't think the other direction into Korea, Japan is also today fully developed. There can be a good win-win situation where very different focus on technologies, where very different focus areas are complementary to each other. Yeah. So having said this one, it's my last slide. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I think we have first the speakers and the Q&A at the end of the panel session. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Ravi Kapoor. He is the promoter director and co-founder of Hoiberg Colors, part of the global Hoiberg group of companies. He has been associated with them for last 26 years. In January 22, Hoiberg joined hands with SK Capital to buy out, to acquire the pigment business of Clariant Switzerland, which is one of the world's two top pigment companies. He's on the global board of the company and executive committee of Hoiberg Group as chief commercial officer. He's the past president of Indian Chemical Council, so I had no choice but to listen to his request to push him up earlier. And chairman of the ICC's Sustainability Committee, which is a passion project for him. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you, Rajan. Good afternoon to all of you, all my dear friends from the chemical industry. It's a pleasure to see everybody and pleasure to see such a packed hall after many years, and I think COVID took its toll, but it's very gratifying to see this. So welcome to this session. First, I just start with a question. How many of you in this audience feel that business is very tough and life is very tough? Can you put your hands up? Okay, Kamal put both his hands up, yeah. I can tell you, you're in a kindergarten compared to what's happening in Europe. So you be happy that you are in India because these are manageable issues and we have issues in Europe. And I think Alexander is going to speak after me, he's going to tell you a little bit more about that. But this is really tough times for Europe. I'm going to modify my topic a little bit because I also found out something very interesting. From Cefic data, which says 97% of the number of companies, chemical companies in Europe are SMEs. I thought India was really taking the cake, but I think you have Europe even a little bit ahead of that. So I've got a, maybe symbolically, I'm trying to make this a little bit lighter today because we're having a lot of heavy stuff. My topic is very heavy. My presentation hopefully is a little lighter, okay? And here is a kind of a quote from Jack Ma, okay? Never give up. Today is hard. Tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine. So I think it's something that we can look forward to. That's the interesting part. But let's see who quoted. It's Jack Ma. Now, where is Jack Ma today? And that's really the contradiction in this, that Jack Ma has disappeared. But in the end of the day, I think makes a lot of sense, and that symbolizes a lot about what's really happening in Europe. The only certain thing is the uncertainty of the situation. That is absolutely certain. And we can have a lot of data, a lot of articles, and there are a lot of pundits who have given a lot of theories and a lot of predictions. In our board meeting, we are discussing first quarter and discussing it in the previous quarter. I really don't think anybody is very clear on what's going to happen, and that's really the uncertainty. Just to go back and rewind, what really happened here? What's this mess about? Now, most of you know, I'm just going to run through quickly to tell you why are we where we are today. So when you had the COVID, and if you look at the COVID, just the basic stats, you got about 5.5 million deaths out of 282 million infected. We had 10%, which, this is important data, which continue to show persistent ill health. And why this is important is if you are having ill health, what is really the mood of a country? What's the mood of a society? It's not going to be so easy if you're not really feeling too well. 50 countries have been vaccinated more than 70%, and poorest 52 countries with 20%, only 6%, 53 million have major depression. Now, this is something which I think is not really understood so much, but if that's the case, again, that's a mood. And for me, when you look at a recession or you look at something going down, I think the mood of society and the world is very important. By 24, the global economy is projected to be about 2.3% smaller than if the pandemic had not happened. So that's a significant number there. And why did this happen? So I call it the perfect storm. It's unusual combination of events or things that produce an unusually bad or powerful result. So you had the year 2022, you had the Chinese New Year, you had the winter, you had the Ukraine issue. Mr. Putin decided to do something. And then COVID in China, which was pretty draconian, there was a real shutdown. And then the first energy crisis in the middle of the year and really aggravated in the later part of the year. You then had a demand drop which came out of the recession, and there was a serious energy crisis here, which is in the months of October, September, October, November. And then the COVID lockdown was even further enforced. This led to the perfect storm. So this, my friends, is really one of the main reasons why we are where we are today. 22 was, in that sense, a bit of a disaster. If you look at the European chemical sector, it's the fourth largest manufacturing producer in Europe, as far as the chemical segment is concerned, employs about 1.2 million, is the second largest producer of chemicals in the world with around 600 billion, invested about 10 billion on R&D, so a big investor on R&I, as we call it. Chemicals are present, as we know, and this has been the theme from the morning, in more than 90% of all products, so you can't really get away from chemicals. The EU Green Deal, which is also one of now the key factors, and actually the word disruptor is wrong, but it's a very significant event of how things are going to happen. The Green Deal is going to be extremely significant on how companies will be behaving from now on going forward. So there is huge amount of money that's going to be spent, but in my opinion, something which is missed, and I was speaking to the president, that this needs to be highlighted by ICC as to the opportunities which are opening up because of enforcement, or let's say because of compliance to the Green Deal. Also, the chemical industry there is the third largest emitter of CO2 in the EU, about 925 tons CO2 and compared to 21. The strong push is there now in all companies as to how to produce, what to produce, and in less than 30 years. So you're planning now because you've got certain timelines with COP26, you have certain timelines with 2030 and going forward, while remaining globally competitive. So this is again important, and continue the supply chains, including clean tech. So this is really the challenge that industry is going to face in Europe. Quick word on this. So as I said, 96%, so we can't really keep this out. They are too significant. They are present at every level. Generally, they produce one line, but they are extremely significant. They employ about 2/3 of the workforce, and therefore integral part of anything that has to be done in Europe. It has to be taken, they have to be taken together. On the EU, on the chemical industry, it's highly integrated, and this we know, into many complex international value chains, sensitive to geopolitical turmoil. Now, this is an understatement because we know what really happened there. And obviously, what happened, we know that this was geopolitical, which could never be really calculated or predicted. It's difficult to predict the long-term impact. This is the uncertainty of the war. And even going forward, every day there are new statements. This was supposed to get finished last year. I mean, it's going on. Initial negative effects now are visible, and accelerated inflation is now there. There's a fragility in the supply chain. And this fragility is something which is bothering because it tends to improve and then again starts to come back. So it's not completely done. This resulted in disruptions on feedstocks and energy sources, which we know, and temporary shutdown of chemical plants resulted, some of them even sometimes permanent. This made a very weak growth, a drastic weak growth, and this also is something that is needed for industry, and this was affecting the industry overall. And this bought into the main, I think everyone talks about it, McKinsey talked about it, previous speakers have talked about it, resilience, the word, need for a focus on resilience, which was as never before. So I don't think Europe ever needed to be as resilient or planned to be as resilient as it does today. What is required is to build a capacity to absorb shocks, because shocks are not going to stop, it seems. It's going to continue, something or the other. If you really look at it, we almost had another shock where we had the secretary of, I think Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, there was something going to happen. Korea decides to put a nice little missile over Japan. This does not end. There is an earthquake in Turkey. I mean, this is not really in our control. These are factors which we can't plan for, but you need to have a capacity to absorb this. And this is going to be an important strategy going forward. So with due respect to Alexander, I just took because we have the title as mega company, and I can't think of any more mega company than the chemical company BASF. And this is again just from public domain. Natural gas, which is very important for BASF, rocketed after the Ukraine situation. It's well known. And you had a price of today of 50 euros per megawatt hour. And this from last year peak of about 340. But it's still higher than the historic average. So, for example, Heubach, who's sitting in Frankfurt in the Herx Park, thought that we want to mitigate risk and we hedged. And now it goes below the hedging, so you get beaten either way. And I think we know how this works. It's terrible, but that's what it is. So hedging not for risk, but then you get hammered. Shares were down by 6%. It's worst performer on DAX. Projected earnings down by about 5 to 5.7 billion. Okay, and in short, it really affected the company. But what is for me most important, the second last slide, what really is the solution? And if after, not the second last slide, I'm sorry, it's the next one, it's coming here. You had job losses, so the company has to cut. And by the way, this is also done by us sitting there. So in case of BASF, 1,800 job losses to cut 2.3%. If I got some of the numbers right, Alexander, forgive me, I mean, and correct me, but this is coming from public domain and from the press. So a production loss in Europe by about 500 million. But the last slide for me is really the savior. Investment in expansion in China and global bet on automotive battery chemicals would be 6.3 billion. And I think from this I take, and this is up 50% from 22 that they do. And this is the takeaway for me which is most important, that if you run like a scared rat, then you're going to be treated like one. And despite all the problems, the plan which is fundamentally strong, which is on a segment which is a growth segment, the investment of $6.3 billion, the company will still do. So one of at least the takeaways is that we need to make sure that we don't lose the plot, even with all the crises. If we have our fundamentals correct, yes, you cut costs, yes, there are job losses. Yes, you just tighten the screw, but yes, you also don't stop growth. And of course, Mr. Brudermüller's comment also is interesting that Europe's competitiveness is increasingly suffering from over-regulation, slow and bureaucratic permitting processes, and in particular high costs for most production input factors. Again, and here I will run a little bit. I like that last line, and I just quote from that. The oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must and survived. I think this is really symbolic of what we want to do. But we need to challenge. And this, I think, for us, this is a message. Now, in our own company, this is something like which has become a norm. You challenge an existing operating model. You challenge a structure. You challenge really logic which you had 6 months ago. Challenge is, I think, a key word in a positive sense. So challenge existing model, governance and reputation, build a robust operational model with focus on a resilient supply chain, which is key. Embrace technologies to ensure resilience. Europe is all about technology. Europe is about R&D, R&I. It's about innovation. This is a part of the world which has actually given the best of innovations, and they have to ride on their strength there. Increase financial resilience, okay, and question and challenge organizational resilience. Now comes the green goals, the global green goals. If you look at it, we can't separate this out from any strategy that we do anywhere, in fact. So the global green goals, India to reach net zero by 2070. Okay, we got a 2070 target and 50% renewable by 2030, where we are going pretty strong. 46 countries pledged to move from coal clean power by 2040. 104 pledged to 30% cut methane, in which in turn is responsible for global warming. 141 countries responsible for 91%. Numbers are figures, okay, but they are stats. What's important is this is a global acceptance and a global phenomena. In Europe, they get tougher on themselves. So climate neutrality by 2050, 55% greenhouse gases net reduction by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Tough target. Energy to 45% from renewable energy, environment, health, reduce waste and plastic by 50%, microplastic by 30% by 2030, reduction in air pollution, 60% by 2030, circularity. Okay. And this is really, I would say, an issue, a cost, a problem, and a possible solution. And also, I think for the group gathered here today, I think this is a learning that if you really look at the green goals, also for Europe and for the world as well, what are the opportunities which open up in this case, rather looking at it from a pure business angle, and this is something we need to mull, it's a separate discussion. I got 5 minutes, I'm going to rush. Okay, I still have 5 minutes, so it's okay. Now, green digital way forward. So, if you look at it, collaboration for innovation, clean energy supply, what is the roadmap and how do we really go forward? And this is as far as Europe is concerned, but there are learnings here for India as well. Collaboration for innovation, clean energy supply, feedstock diversification, these actions will contribute towards the transition and are set against a timeline and should be. So this is something which we need to do. Use, the second factor is use technology component focused on electrification, hydrogen, biomass, waste, carbon capture, CCU, and also CCS, process efficiencies are the last one which we know in any case and we should do. Finally, for Europe, what is important is the regulatory aspect. The regulatory component that collects existing legislation, research and innovation initiatives, lists it down, influencing digital and sustainable development of the chemical industry. Now, these three pillars basically, or these three strategies, making a strategy, will improve resilience, sustainability and circularity. And this goes towards the European Green Goal. So this is definitely going to be a key factor. Now, I know many in the room also, and there's been talk that Europe uses this a little bit as a trade barrier, and it's likely tomorrow that you're going to have carbon neutrality scores, which may be also used to attract duty when there are countries exporting into Europe. So, but be that as it may, I think we can't dispute the need, we can't dispute what really needs to be done. I think the lesson there needs to be taken very clearly. And I'll just end with, you know, I have many friends from Europe, and I have this German colleague and friend who came the first time to India and asked me, "Hey Ravi, why do you have so many gods in India?" Because he saw many gods, you know, different formats and different, you know, faces. So I just put this slide together. We have three, I told him, I researched. We have Brahma the creator, we have Vishnu the preserver, and we have Shiva the destroyer. Strangely, Brahma in India is not worshipped a lot. Vishnu is, and Shiva the destroyer is also. This symbolizes a little bit how the world goes. We create, we preserve, and it's inevitable it gets destroyed. But this is serious, and my message is a little different here. We also have 33 gods with 8 Vasus, 9, 11 Rudras, and 12 Adityas. But he asked this question, why so many gods? And I said, listen, because We have so many problems in India that we need so many gods. Now, I take an analogy from this, and I think also Europe definitely needs more gods than there are today to get out of this issue, because again, there's uncertainty, but I think it's a great continent, and I think they will come out of it. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. Now we have Mr. Alexander Gerting from BASF. He spent, I think, last almost 22 years with BASF. And, well, he's just come into Bombay, I think, about a week ago. So welcome, welcome to India, and welcome to Mumbai and India and ICC. We are looking forward to hearing from you. He's going to talk about building resilience in the chemical industry through sustainability.
So, good afternoon, everybody in the room. And Ravi, I was not planning to present on the situation of the chemical industry and specifically BASF in Europe. But since you introduced the topic, I feel obliged that I also mention. Yeah, Ravi, I feel obliged to also make some comments there. So BASF announced last Friday the calendar year results for 2022, and also some efficiency measures that Ravi had mentioned. Yeah, obviously the situation in the chemical industry in Europe has been not easy, driven certainly also by the energy crisis. Driven by the regulatory environment, but also the context of a softening demand in the one or the other value chain. So I think, BASF, we had to take certain decisions to prepare ourselves to be resilient for the future. And I think, BASF has been around for 157 years, and I'm confident that we will continue to be around for the same timing into the future. And I think the measures that have been announced are painful in Germany, specifically also in Ludwigshafen. But our commitment as a company to our Verbund site in Ludwigshafen stays and is firm. It will remain the biggest Verbund site in the world. And investments will continue to happen also into Ludwigshafen, especially as we prepare ourselves for the energy transformation that we need to do to achieve our sustainability targets. And I'm actually here today to speak about exactly that, and to speak about especially the opportunities that we have as a chemical industry in India, because I'm very excited, first of all, to be here, and I really thank the Indian Chemical Council to invite me. I arrived a week ago with my family, so we are very, very happy and excited to be here. And I have to say, I'm very, very impressed and also inspired by what I heard today, and by being in a room with this vast experience and skill set and professionalism. So I'm happy to be part of this now moving forward. It's the 16th Indian Chemical Council. It's the first one for me. I hope there will be some more in the future. And I really look forward to not only support BASF's development in India, but also to contribute to the chemical industry in India and to the country development. So having said that, my focus is to talk about the opportunities that we see in India. And as you can see on the heading for the presentation, Building Resilience in the Chemical Industry Through Sustainability, I really was reflecting a bit from the presentations early this morning, and when McKinsey, I think Chris from McKinsey was mentioning that sustainability is really a prerequisite to maintain resilience, also in India, all over the next years. And it's sort of our license to operate as a chemical industry. So I truly believe in that. We as a company truly believe in sustainability, that it's an opportunity. And since we serve so many industries, I think it's also a responsibility that we have as BASF, but also as a chemical industry, to do our part to prepare ourselves and make sure that we are resilient and stay resilient. So Having said that, if I move, I think we've heard a lot today, and I'm not going to dwell into the details here, about the powerhouse, the economic powerhouse, but also the demographic powerhouse that India represents. I think it's impressive, the development that India has had and the outlook and prospects that India will continue to have. It's already the 5th largest economy, surpassing UK and knocking on Germany's door next. And I think it was very clear that there is a clear vision by 2047, you know, to have this number be 10 times, yeah, not 3.5 trillion, but, you know, I think we saw the number today early in the morning. So I think it's the fastest growing, largest economy before the pandemic. It's the fastest growing, largest economy coming out of the pandemic. And I think the prospects are very, very clear. And what excites me especially is the human capital and the human talent that India has. I mean, if you think about not only the growing middle class with increased spending that will happen, but also the demographic composition of the human capital in the country. 1.4 billion people, 1 billion being below 35 years of age. I think this will propel the domestic demand and export, obviously, as well, as we heard earlier this year. But 2/3 of the GDP is really domestic demand. That is a strength that India has, and I think we're in unprecedented times, also as a chemical industry, to participate and to support the development moving forward. So that is clearly undisputed. You know, the powerhouse, both economically and from a demographic perspective. Now, it's not only about growth at any price. I think it has to be a conscious growth, and I really acknowledge and appreciate that the government has laid out very, very clear sustainability commitments. Yeah, if you look at the COP26 commitments that you see on the left-hand side, I think this has accelerated. This shows the clear intent and the clear direction that is laid out also by the Indian government. And I think there's concrete examples as you see on the right-hand side. So if you look at the emission norms, you know, it took to move from one emission norm to the next 5 to 7 years in the past. And India actually skipped an emission norm and moved from 4 to 6, you know, within a shorter period of time, within a 3-year time period. So I think that shows a clear acceleration, and also BASF supported this transition. Actually, in every four-wheeler car, light vehicle, heavy-duty vehicle, every second vehicle that you see on the street has a BASF catalyst in it. So we contributed also to enable this transformation, and will continue to do so. If we think about, you know, electric vehicles, I think not only in the four-wheeler segment, but also two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment, I think there's clear targets that have been set by 2030. 30% of private four-wheelers should be electric, and 80% actually of two and three-wheelers. So I think there's a clear dynamic here, a clear expectation, and there will be a contribution also from the chemical industry to support this transformation. And then last but not least, moving from a linear economy to a circular economy, I think we touched on that today as well. Not only the ban of single-use plastic, but waste management regulations as well, and recycling elements here as well. So there's also a clear direction to go to a circular economy. So it's about growth, but it's about conscious growth. And we as a chemical industry have a responsibility to contribute to that transformation. Chemistry is in everything we do and buy. We produce, obviously, CO2, and you know, our production processes need quite some energy, and we'll need more energy in the future if we want to go to a sustainable transformation. And we, as a chemical industry, are Scope 3 for a lot of our customers and the consumers and our customers will demand from us that we become more sustainable. So this is a clear responsibility that we carry all together. Transitioning from there to BASF, our purpose as a company is to create chemistry for a sustainable future, and anything we do is aimed towards that purpose. We are a thought leader in sustainability, but we are also an action leader. We have set clear commitments. We want to be net zero by 2050. We want to reduce our CO2 emissions in our operations, scope 1 and 2, significantly in the next years. We have done so also in the past. We want to steer our portfolio to more sustainable solutions, and we are engaging with our suppliers also to make sure that the suppliers we choose to be partnering with also move towards more sustainable raw materials and production of those. Some examples of what we do in India to support this transformation. Obviously in our production sites, and here you see Dahej and Mangalore, we are making an energy transformation. The majority of the energy that we consume is coming from green sources. Yeah, in Mangalore we have a bio boiler, for example, which is operated based on coffee husk, and more than 90% of the steam that we need to generate our plant there is coming from the bio boiler. And obviously we are also not only making but also buying with purchase power agreements, green energy. So a clear commitment that in our production sites within our gate, we make sure that we move towards an energy efficient and green energy transition. In the middle you see a sustainable sourcing with a renewable feedstock, which is castor farming. Actually, India produces 80% of the worldwide castor beans, and castor beans are used to produce castor oil, and that is a key raw material that goes into many different products, plastics, dyes, pigments. Yeah, so that is a renewable raw material, and we cooperated here with many farms, smallholder farmers in the area where castor is being grown. And to date, I think we've worked with more than 4,500 farmers, helping them, supporting them to become more sustainable in their operations, to reduce water consumption, to increase yields, and have good agricultural practices. And this is a code that has been certified. So also all of these smallholder farms have been certified and can claim that they have also become more sustainable. So we are looking into making sure that also the raw materials we bring in today are coming from renewable sources. But we look especially into the future, and it cannot remain with the raw materials we have today. We have to look at new potential sources of raw materials. And here, our arm of BASF Venture Capital, we invested into C6, which is a company that is based in India, in Bangalore, and they're a leader in producing and harvesting on scale red seaweed. And red seaweed does not only also go as a renewable raw material into multiple products, yeah, but it can also become actually a renewable fuel, a biofuel in the future. So we are looking also at disruptive new potential raw materials down the line. We also focus on making sure that we can measure our product carbon footprint. I think there's a lot of talk about product carbon footprint, and we have developed a methodology that we're also sharing, with a third party, to customers, to relevant interested parties, yeah, on how to actually calculate, measure the carbon footprint of our solutions, the products that we offer. And this is not only for scope 1 and 2, so but this is also looking at our supplier base. So we not only measure and calculate based on real-time data, not on standard average data, but a real-time data, what our carbon footprint is on the products that we produce and the energy we consume, but also of the raw materials that come into our production sites from our supplier base. And that gives us a good starting point to then say, okay, how can we improve those carbon footprints moving forward? Because that's the intention. And I think it provides transparency on what the CO2 impact is of the products that we sell. And this is my last slide. I think I'm very excited to be part and to be invited to this event. I think we as a chemical industry have a great opportunity and also a responsibility to contribute to this transformation in India. And it really requires a collective effort. It cannot be just the effort of one individual company. We have to work together as an industry. We have to establish a common language around sustainability. And obviously we have to continue to work constructively with the government and with industry players. So I think it's fascinating to see the progress and the acceleration of potential in India. And I'm really, really excited to embark on this journey and support BASF and the chemical industry from a BASF perspective moving forward. So thank you very much for your invitation and looking forward to engage with many of you. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Chandrakant Nayak. He's going to talk about what has changed for chemicals globally and the USA. He has been with Dow since 1995, and he's a colleague with me on the ICC Executive Committee. So I've known him for the last couple of years. He's a polymer technology graduate from UD City and been with Dow since 1995. Started his career there.
Good afternoon. I know I'm standing between you and tea. So while the technical part is getting addressed, I will start talking. Okay, good. So since morning, we have been listening to a lot of speakers, and what distinctly stood out is one thing that, at least for me, that in most of the chemicals, most of the materials, we are 1/5, 1/3, 1/10 of global per capita consumption, right? Everybody picked that up, right? So what does this mean? That we have a leaked question paper. The question paper is leaked. The world has already shown what they did 10 years back, 20 years back. So for us, it is much simple case what we need to do. And connecting to the topic that we are saying, that leveraging parallels from the world and learning from those experiences, I think we can really take a lot of cues from what happened in the world in last few years and how the world addressed those challenges. So in this aspect, coming from a US company, I would like to share a few thoughts. I'm not going to share any data. I'm going to share a few thoughts how companies like us address those challenges. So about 10 years back, 10, 15 years back, everybody thought when the investment started happening in Asia, in the chemical industry, there was a thought that US companies will not stay competitive, right? And the other emerging geographies will take over the chemical industry. But US companies have evolved and they have stayed competitive over the years. Today we hear European companies may have challenge, and we have BASF here and we have quite a few European companies. But I'm very sure that the chemical industry will learn and will innovate to fight these challenges, because ultimately chemical industry is the pillar for the world in terms of supply of quality materials and sustainability. We talk about any challenge in the world, it can be met only with good materials. So let me share a little bit about what we as US company have done. And I'm sharing Dow India at a glance. This is my corporate Dow India slide, but not to share all the details. But two things I want you to focus on. If you look at our locations, there is 3 centers of excellence. And these 3 centers of excellence, one is Central Engineering Chennai Center, and the other one is Mumbai Global Accounting Center. Why I'm mentioning this? This is the way US companies have really learned how to manage their cost and productivity. So these are our biggest global centers based out of India. So one is the engineering. So all our engineering work for plant designing, for our capital investments is primarily done in India. And the other one is accounting. So this is our biggest global accounting center in India. All the financial closures is done from India. So US companies have learned over the years how to utilize global talent for their needs and how to improve productivity. If we look at chemical industry, and I'm sure everybody will agree, the crude oil price has only over the years gone up. We may look at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or more than that. But crude oil price has gone up. If we look at some of the chemical pricing, I don't want to get into the absolute pricing. Some of the chemical prices are almost stagnant. Today, the shampoo price or a conditioner price may have gone up 10 times in last 20 years. Where is the chemical price that is getting into the shampoo or conditioner? So how chemical industry has survived? Only through productivity. This is the biggest element to learn from the world's large chemical companies, how to keep improving productivity and keep innovating. Why it is so relevant now for us? This year, India is hosting G20, and these learnings are so important around G20 because G20 contributes to 85% of world's GDP and almost 75% of world trade. So this is an excellent forum for us to represent what India brings and how US companies or other companies can benefit from India. So it is very, very relevant. And if we look at the focus areas for G20, they are employment, climate sustainability, energy transitions, and trade and investment. So this is absolutely important, and this is for all big economies, these 4 pillars are not changing. We all have gone through a big pandemic experience, and we call it as black swan events. So what has changed and how big has been the impact? So we have seen leapfrogging of technology. So a lot of work that was done face to face or through work in proximity, now we have learned to do it virtually. So remote working is a reality now, remote monitoring, even remote maintenance is a reality today. Some of the work that required constrained kind of a entry in the reactors and that posed concerns, safety concerns. Today it is done by using technology very, very effectively. So although we talk about the pandemic, there have been a lot of learnings coming through pandemic that has really helped the chemical industry. Other one we have seen with COVID pandemic, shifting of supply chains. And today we don't talk about just in time. Now customers want just in time, but also they want just in case. If they don't need it, they want you to keep it ready. They don't want to keep the inventory, but they want you to supply them just in time and just in case. This is a big shift in the chemical industry, and that's what is making a big challenge for the global companies. The third area, or what we have seen as a black swan event, is trade and investment. Partnering across countries is a big point of discussion, and this is going to stay here for a long time. It is not that, all these FTA agreements and other things, it's just a few years or few decades thing. The world has learned the power of collaboration, and rather than fighting and competing with each other, the world is today looking at how they can collaborate and play to each other's strengths. So what are the headwinds that have really impacted the chemical industry last few years? And US companies have been at the forefront of this. So one is the global inflation and weakening global economies. I am sure this is not new to anybody, but this has posed a huge challenge to chemical industry. And if we look at last 100 years period, there are very few chemical companies which have survived. And especially if we look at Fortune 500, many of them have really found it difficult to survive. Either they have been acquired or they have merged with some other company. So this is a reality of life. Job losses and falling consumer confidence. This is again a global phenomena. Here in India, we are still lucky that most of us will agree that we see still consumer demand reasonably good. So we are, as I said, we have a leaked question paper. So we also have, since we are very low on per capita consumption, it is much easier for us to manage it. Oil and energy price volatility. I think this is a reality. And again, the oil prices may fall, they may be low or they may go up, but uncertainty is going to be around for more time. And this is again another reality of life. And lastly, climate change is key focus area and is the only focus area for whether it is government, whether it is corporate, whether it is consumer. And we may feel that in India, consumers are still not adapting or still not serious about climate change. I can tell you, the moment they see someone destroying the climate or environment, we will see the voices coming to us. And in that sense, chemical companies have to adapt, understand the challenge of climate change and start focusing on that. And this is what is happening in many companies, including US companies, very, very well. So how do we rebound and reset? So first of all, the way US companies are addressing and many other companies are addressing, I will not talk about only US companies, I think we have to have sustainability in our DNA. Today, I can talk about Dow that every investment decision in our company today has to pass the sustainability criteria. The latest cracker investment in Canada that was announced is a carbon neutral cracker. This is the first big carbon neutral cracker that has been announced, and Dow is very proud that this will bring a lot of technology innovations. But it is possible, and many companies are now taking lead to show to the world that sustainability is not expensive. Sustainability, many years back we were saying that safety requires more capital and it is expensive, right? It increases cost. But today, over the decades, industry has learned that safety brings more money on an ongoing basis. And those companies which did not adopt safety, they do not survive. Sustainability is another next thing. It is not the cost, it is the ticket to survival of the corporates. Portfolio transformation, I think this is very important, and you have seen that many American companies have been actively divesting and acquiring companies. And what does it mean? That if I look at my own company, I have been 28 years with Dow. Some of the businesses I managed today do not exist in Dow. So we keep looking for better owners. And our belief is that if someone else can run that portfolio better than us, it is better to divest than holding it and being incompetitive to serve the customers. And the world is realizing this more and more. That's why I think someone spoke about consolidation and getting more focused on core. That is going to happen. So it's very important to have portfolio transformation. Digital is extremely important, and I already mentioned that chemical industry is surviving only because of productivity. The world scale capacity that we talk about today for any chemical and the world scale capacity 20 years back or 50 years back is completely different. And digital is going to change the dynamics totally. Digital will bring the next level of productivity, what you could get in terms of cost optimization, in terms of innovation, in terms of R&D, in terms of consumer understanding. We are just scratching the surface. But earlier we ride on the digital transformation is better for the chemical industry. And lastly, supply chain. Re-architecting this to safety and carbon footprint is extremely important. We have seen that customer demands, as I said, just in time is old thought. Now just in time and if I need or just in case is the reality. We need to be agile, we need to be cost competitive, and the world will move towards reducing molecular tourism. Today, if we see molecular tourism is probably one of the biggest contributor to carbon footprint. And it will happen, the world will look at what is the best way to reduce the molecular tourism in the world. And that's why more and more investments will happen in that sense. So my last slide. So what are the latent, what we can learn from US? So first of all, broader and realistic approach to feed our energy needs. Now, if you look at last many years, US was not the largest oil producer or oil exporter, right? But today the terminology has changed from oil to energy. Everybody talks about energy needs. And in this, if we see, earlier oil was linked directly to energy. Today, the world situation has completely changed. The shale gas has completely changed the energy footprint of US. And today, if we look at energy exporter and oil and gas together, US is a substantial player, probably largest player in the world. And on top of this, in last 10 years, when we look at 2020 as compared to 2010, US has doubled its renewable energy production. So while they are having the shale gas, which is a very strong advantage to them, they have not stopped there. They have moved from coal to energy and they are now moving to renewable, and that capacity is strengthening every year. Developing recycling ecosystem, again this is very, very big focus area, and this is again linked to feedstock. So I don't want to get into mechanical recycling or upcycling but reducing the dependence and reducing the consumption of feedstock by all the means of closing the loop is extremely important, and that's what we could learn. And in this, we have already seen how the world has worked towards bringing better solutions here. And India has a huge advantage. We have, I don't want to say cheap labor, but we have still labor available. Many countries today are fighting with labor availability, but at least we have labor available and we have brain available, talent available here. So this is one area we could really show to the world that even before our consumption comes at parity with the world, how we can already have best-in-class recycling technologies in India. Third thing is moving towards carbon neutrality. A lot has been spoken about this, so my only simple message is carbon neutrality will not come only by corporates pledging to carbon neutrality and only by governments pledging to carbon neutrality. It will not come. It has to be with every individual. If 50% of the world votes about carbon neutrality and rest of the world doesn't worry about that, it is not going to be done. So someone will be subsidizing or spending more money for those who are not focused on carbon neutrality. So this is very important to understand that carbon neutrality, the true carbon neutrality will come only when every individual, every consumer adopts carbon neutral practices. And last one, realistic plastic waste management pathway. This is linked to recycling ecosystem, but again, we have to be mindful that we are still at a stage where we will need more consumption. Today, many countries in the world, they have peaked their consumption, but we are not peaked our consumption. So a realistic plastic waste management pathway is very much important. And this is a little bit different from recycling. And I know many of us are in the plastic industry. So this is something which we'll need to present to the government, that while we are trying to control, we also need to be mindful. And this is exactly what we had seen in other countries also. When they were growing, they kept focus on bringing the systems, but I wouldn't say that they violated or they brought down the standards, but they had a realistic mindset. And lastly, innovations for sustainable future. And this, I said, sustainability is the key of focus, whether it is product innovation, process innovation, or business innovation. So these are a few thoughts I thought I will share with you from the global chemical industry. And thank you very much for listening. And I hope, Rajan, I'm well within the time. Thank you.